Move forward with our first panel discussion for the day on the topic developing an integrated supply chain to be agile and future ready. I'd like to invite our moderator for the session. We have with us Mr. Amit Bansal, Partner, Forensic Financial Advisory, Deloitte India, on stage. Joining him, we have our panel member, Mr. Anil Digekar, who is the chairman of the JNPT. We have Dr. Vijay Sabir Singh, Principal Secretary, Home Department, Government of Maharashtra. Joining them is Mr. Hemant Sekar, Chief Purchase Officer for Mahindra and Mahindra. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue with that round of applause. We also have with us Mr. Prasad Shidhai, who is the Director for Regional Operations Development, Johnson & Johnson Medical India. We have Mr. Vikas Anand, Managing Director, DHL Supply Chain. And joining them, we also have Mr. Prakash Tulsiani, the Executive Director and CEO, All Cargo Logistics. Mr. Bansal, over to you.
Thank you. Hello. Good morning, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to all the panelists. We have a very august panel today, and a very diverse one too. I think we couldn't have a better representation. We have a representation from the policymakers side. We have a representation from somebody who's one of the largest port operators. We have representation from two very large manufacturers. And we have two of the largest logistics services providers with very, very different niches. So my attempt will be to kind of get the best out of the panel. Given the way the business is evolving in the newer and modern times, the business is becoming extremely complex and uncertain. The consumer tastes are changing and changing very, very fast. The spending patterns are changing very, very fast, which means all the businesses needs to realign themselves. In addition, you have issues coming from regulatory developments. We have been talking of the GST coming in. The GST will have a significant impact in terms of how the supply chain is planned and how the movement of goods happen. So there are these kind of developments from a policy side which keep on happening, which have an impact on how the goods can move. And then we have some of the innovations which keep on coming in from the disruptive businesses. 10 years back, we never thought e-commerce will be as large as what it is today. The way we travel, that has got completely transformed with the coming in of the likes of the Olas and the Ubers. So these are the kind of disruptions which are happening in the marketplace. In context of this, what does it mean in terms of planning an efficient supply chain? So clearly, the need of the hour for the supply chain is to be not only robust and reliable, but also to be nimble, flexible, and a very, very fast turnaround. So in that context, I will start with Dr. Singh and take his perspective in terms of, when we talk of supply chain, and I've attended a lot of conferences, most of the conferences end up talking of issues, and especially in regards to infrastructure. That infrastructure tends to be one of the biggest constraints around movement of goods. I'll want to take Dr. Singh's views in terms of what are the steps, let's say, what government is taking, both you can talk from a government of Maharashtra perspective as well as the steps which you may be aware at the central government level to facilitate the private investments as well as smoother movement of goods. Dr. Singh.
Thank you, Amit, and good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to congratulate the organizers of this event because supply chain management is a very important subject, considering that India is fast becoming a manufacturing hub in this part of the world. And I've been told that this is an annual event. It's organized every year. So I must congratulate you also for giving us an opportunity to interact and share our views. Now, as far as government is concerned, I think we all agree that the role of the government is that of a facilitator. Government is also involved in regulatory activities. Of course, this role is fast changing. And apart from regulations, government is directly, indirectly involved in development activities. As far as business is concerned, the government definitely has taken concrete steps to make sure that business is facilitated and all facilities are provided in order to promote the ease of doing business. The government of Maharashtra has always been proactive in this direction. During the last 2-3 years, the state government has taken action to encourage investments in infrastructural activities. You must have seen the press reports also. The government has approved so many projects of infrastructure in the state, within Mumbai and outside Mumbai. If you think of Mumbai, to give you a few examples, the Coastal Road project has been given approval. Similarly, the Navi Mumbai airport is on the right track and the bids are being invited. Similarly, you have Metro 3 that is in place. In the rest of the state, also we have projects widening the roads, express highways, having new roads, and in all, more than 50,000 crores of rupees would be the overall cost on these projects in Maharashtra. And within the city of Mumbai alone, the cost of these projects is more than 70,000 crores. So this shows the commitment on the part of the state government to go ahead with efforts to provide world quality infrastructure, especially in roads and railways and ports also. As far as railways are concerned, the state government would have a partnership in a company with the Ministry of Railways to undertake several railway projects in the state. The state government has already given an in-principle approval to the projects costing more than 23,000 crores on the railway projects in different parts of the state. And every project will be managed through SPV. We will have collaboration with the Ministry of Railways and also have public-private partnership to undertake these projects, manage these projects professionally and efficiently, and also make sure that remote areas in the state are provided connectivity. We have a new port policy in place. The state, as you know, has 2 major ports and 48 non-major ports. The state government is making efforts to provide connectivity to these ports and also participate actively in the programs undertaken by the Government of India, which are very ambitious programs like Sagarmala and which are based on port-led development. A holistic development of the area surrounding the ports would also provide infrastructure, would also provide warehouses, logistics, and all other facilities which are necessary. So this shows very clearly that the state government has been proactive and has undertaken several measures to make sure that infrastructure facilities are provided which are world-class in quality. Apart from all these measures which the state government has undertaken, the state government has also started action to formulate suitable policies and provide an enabling environment for the business in the state. In the Home Department, there were certain regulations and laws which required licenses for the hotels, for the restaurants to start their business. All these legal provisions have been done away with. And 40 years old rules have been repealed. This has happened for the first time in the state and perhaps for the first time in the country also. Now, if anybody wants to start an eating house, a restaurant, or a hotel, he does not require the permission of the Home Ministry. It can be started without any type of permission or license. The state government has also declared certain services under the Right to Services Act mandatory to be provided to the concerned applicants. And in all, 224 such services have been declared under the Act. Out of these services, about 42 services are given online, and for that, application can be given online, and in a time-bound manner, the services are given. Simplification of procedures is another major initiative which the state government has undertaken. All the forms are being simplified, unnecessary details are being avoided. As you know, the forms used to be very complicated, and a lot of information used to be asked for. Now, all these forms are being simplified. Online submission of applications is being encouraged, and for most of the services, for most of the licenses, permits, the applications can be submitted online, and the entire process is also completed in a time-bound manner, and the licenses, permits, permissions are being granted within the prescribed time limit without any delay. These are very important developments, and the state government has taken effective measures to make sure that suitable policies are in place and the business activities in the state are promoted in a very big way. The other participants in our panel will also discuss in details how the infrastructure activities are being undertaken, and especially the areas around the ports are being developed under the new policy which the state government has in place. I would also like to know from you the difficulties which you face or which you still feel that business partners are facing in the state, so that we can note them down and we can take appropriate measures. The state government is always willing to listen to the grievances. And wherever we find that there are hurdles in the business, hurdles in doing the business, right decisions are taken, and the state government is proactive in this direction. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. It is really encouraging to know that so many actions are being taken towards easing the way one conducts business. A lot of these things do not get mentioned in the media, and it's really encouraging to know. I'll move on to Mr. Anil Digikar. Anil, you are the chairman of JNPT, and again, when it comes to movements of goods, ports and the infrastructure plays a very, very important role. JNPT being one of the largest ports and the largest container terminal. What are the kind of things which are happening at JNPT, and what are the kind of actions which you have taken which can improve the robustness of the movement of goods and with more reliability?
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me. Our Honorable Minister and Honorable Prime Minister, they have really given priority to the port sector. We all know that logistic cost in India is about 18%, whereas in Europe and other countries it is 12%, 10 to 12%, and in China it is 8%. So it is a constant endeavor of Government of India, especially Shipping Ministry, to encourage the transport by water and by rail. So my minister always says, if you transport something by road, it costs suppose 1.25 rupees. By rail, it will cost 1 rupee. By water, it will cost 25 paisa only. So coastal shipping, port development, as well as riverine shipping, these are the three priorities given by Shipping Ministry in the port sector. As far as JNPT is concerned, it's one of the biggest, highest container handling port in the country. The port started in the year 1989, but the road infrastructure, the evacuation, over the 25 years has not developed as it was required to be developed. So many steps have been taken in the last 2 years. For the knowledge of this gathering, we have raised about 400 million foreign loan with just 2.5% interest, because our earning is in dollar terms. If we had gone for any Indian infrastructure loan, we would have got it at 12%. And we are developing all the roads from JNPT to NH4, NH17, which is about 42 kilometers, and 6 to 8 laning will be done. The work has been started. In another 2 years, this work will be completed. Other major evacuation problem was about rail. So our ministry, along with the railway, we have formed Indian Port Rail Corporation Limited Company, which is totally under the Shipping Ministry. The company has started, and wherever last end connectivity is required, all the work is assigned to IPRCL. Otherwise, railway is busy on in its own business, and the priority to the port connectivity is given very at the last stage. So IPRCL has been started. As far as JNPT is concerned, ease of doing business and efficiency improvement, these are the major aspects which was given priority in last 2 years. And I am proud to tell you that under the ease of doing business, first time we have started this DPD facility. It has been open to all the importers, which will be saving about 25,000 to 40,000 per TEU. Any container which is imported, and if it has got a custom permission, it can be evacuated from my port within 1.5 days directly to the consignee, instead of going to CFS, which will be saving 40,000 rupees. So this has been started since last 3 months, and now many customers are coming for this DPD facility. Apart from direct port delivery, we have started movement of containers to and from the CFS by rail, and we are giving subsidy. If you don't use TTs and if you use the rail, we will be giving you subsidy per TU. Also, parking areas have been developed for all three containers terminals, so that the congestion on the road can be reduced. Then setting up of laboratories for speedy clearances. There are many laboratories which were not there in the JNPT area, and they were situated in New Bombay or Vashi area. So the officers used to come after 2 days, 3 days, 4 days to inspect the goods, and it used to delay in the evacuation of the containers. That has also been started. Also, e-delivery orders has been started. Then online berthing, unberthing, it has been computerized. Creation of logistic data bank for tagging of containers. This is started along with the DMIC. So any container which will be moving from JNPT to DMIC any area, it can be on time location can be identified through RFID tag. We are also working on various efficiency parameters. RFID has been started in one of the terminals, so it is reducing about 20 to 25 minutes for evacuation of the trucks. Apart from existing 3 containers, now we are coming up with our 4th container, that is Port of Singapore Authority, which will be adding to another 4.5 million ton capacity, and the first phase will be completed in 2017 and second phase will be completed by 2021. So we will be in the first 20 ports in the world handling more than 10 million TEUs. Again, my minister, Honorable Sri Gadkari Sahab, he has come up with the idea that there should be dry ports in India, so that like Wardha and Jalna in Aurangabad, we are coming up with dry ports, so that all the facilities including the custom clearances will be done at the dry ports only, and the goods can be loaded in the train and they will be directly sold to the ships. Vadhavan is another port along with the MMB which we are undertaking, which is having the highest draft, about 20 meters, and it will be about 30,000 crores project, will be implemented in 4 stages, and it will be handling about 273 million tons cargo in the next 20 years. So anything you would like to raise about problems regarding JNPT and evacuation problems, I am ready to listen to them and will try to address the grievances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dagikar. That's really heartening to know that so much is being done. And I know personally that evacuation at JNPT has been one big pain point. And I think over the next 2 to 3 years, when this the project on expansion of roads gets completed, it will significantly reduce the turnaround time, which we have already seen at JNPT, which it has. I was having a discussion with Mr. Dagikar, and he mentioned it has come down from 44 hours to 34 hours. 37 hours. So that's again, encouraging to see. And over the next 2 to 3 years, we will see this coming down even further. So we heard from the policymakers and the infrastructure providers' perspective. Now I'll move on to Prasad, and I'll request him to talk, from a manufacturer's perspective, and especially coming from the industry, of medical devices. You have some very special needs, and what are the kind of challenges which you face? And if you can also talk of, let's say a case example where you have managed those challenges successfully. Prasad.
Good morning. I hope I am audible to the last row. The topic for today given to us is how do we build a future-ready supply chain and how do we build agility. So I'll start with one tagline and which is very relevant to the today's topic. And this tagline is from the reputed automobile industry, and I like it very much. So what it states is that benchmarking, building processes, brilliant processes is our strategy. We get brilliant results, by managing these processes through ordinary people. So I think processes are very important in building the future supply chain strategy. And so we can build our future supply chain strategy with the 3P formula, which I propose and which we are working on. One is how do we build strong processes, and how do we have adequately competent people to manage those processes. So if you multiply processes with the competent people, you will get the results and the performance what you desire. So according to us, in the industry, what do you mean by future-ready supply chain? So supply chain basically is the passageway between the customers and the suppliers for carrying out the processes and the services and linking the elements in between and integrating those elements in between and delivering those products and services to the customer at affordable value with the stricter quality and compliance control is what supply chain means to us. And so if I have to go like, how do we build future supply chain? So, like marketing mix, we have 7 Ps. So I come with the 7 Cs model for building the future supply chain model. And what are those 7 Cs in the future supply chain model is like, one is on core values and culture, which is very important. So, it's like a business philosophy. Why we are in the business, what is the purpose of our business. Unlike in J&J, we have the credo, so which talks about our business philosophy. It talks about clearly our responsibilities. So we have the 4 paragraphs in the credo, which talks, first paragraph is about our patients, our doctors, nurses, and the customers who all use our products. It also covers our suppliers and distributors. So the first paragraph of the responsibility covers the entire supply chain part. The second responsibility talks about our employees. Third talks about our community where we work and live. And the fourth talks about the stakeholder management. So this is the philosophy which helps to lead the organization to take the relevant decisions and to build a culture and to work on way to go. So I think that helps to the business. So this is the first major C I would like to define here, whereby it should be communicated wide across the employees, in the stakeholders and the functions internally and externally to set the clear priorities. The second C is about the customer centricity. So in today's world, it is very important to know what are the customer needs are, and to build the internal processes to deliver what customer wants, to build the product pipelines what customer wants, and deliver at affordable price. So the most important point is how do we connect with the customer? Because earlier we used to say that that linking with the customer is only the responsibility of sales and marketing organization. But today's scenario, if you see, in future, all the functions should engage in the customer development program. Not only sales and marketing, but the supply chain and all our partners in research and development, so that they get a VOC, voice of customer, that is built into our processes for delivering. And also, it also gives us the insights what's happening in the market and how do we correct our internal processes to align with the market requirements. It also gives us the feedback on our product delivery, about the quality of the products and the complaints, which gives a lot of insights. Then the third is the important C is connect and communication. After connecting with the customer, how do you translate the customer needs into our internal processes? How do you give visibility of those customer needs into our internal processes? How do you give visibility of customer complaints to our manufacturing processes? So some of the industries I have seen, the customer complaints are displayed on the manufacturing line so that it is visible to the manufacturing staff over there, and they can take a corrective actions, get involved into this. So how do you connect, how do you communicate with the internal functions, internal employees, and externally with the suppliers, with the trade customers and service provider? How do you integrate with them? what is the kind of ERP solutions you have, what is the kind of integration, what are the kind of electronic interfaces you have, so that your end-to-end information flow, which actually help us to build on the agility. And that is the important factor, because the more you are integrated, the more you are connected, the agility will be more. And you can churn your information, you can turn your supply chain cycle time, you can reduce the cycle time. The next important piece is on building capabilities and the capacities. So that is also a very important piece. So in the whole supply chain network, you need to know what are our capacities, capabilities, not only within the company, but with our partners and the suppliers and the service providers. So we should know all the capacities available, and we should know what are the minimum and maximal deliverables of each step. And wherever is the gap should be part of our future deployment or future sourcing strategy. That is very important. And another important aspect is, for all the capacities and capabilities, we should have service level agreements between all the supply chain links, so that we can measure their performance versus the service level agreements, and that performance measure itself will tell us what are the gaps and how do you build the gaps into our future sourcing strategy. So that is very important. Then moving on to capacities and capabilities, the next important piece is the compliance. I think this is the very important element for future ready supply chain. We need to be very conscious about compliance, and there should be zero tolerance for non-compliances, because this is the only success criteria. If you see all the successful industry in the world, the compliance is the biggest success factor in them. And how do we take care of compliance? What is the kind of risk management system we have? What is the kind of audit processes we have? What is the kind of corrective actions planning we have? So these are the important elements. Moving forward, the another C, and that is the 6th C, which I am talking about, is the competition. How do we, supply chain provides a competitive edge in terms of customer segmentation, in terms of market segmentation, in terms of product segmentation? How do we provide 24/7 service to the customer? Because that is very important in medical devices. How do you provide 24/7 in some trauma surgeries? How do you provide 24/7 service? How do you differentiate your customer service parameters? How do you measure customer experiences is very important for us, and build that measurement into our improvements. And the last and important piece is the cost. While doing everything, how do you manage your cost? How do you work on cost optimization? How do you leverage on your partnership with your suppliers? How do you leverage on their strengths and the internal strengths and the external strengths? How do you work on tax optimization projects is the last C. So these are the 7C formula, which I feel is very essential for building agility and the future supply chain. So that's my thought, and I'll like to share further.
That's very insightful, Prasad, and it only reiterates the fact that supply chain is more complex than mere movement of goods. And there is a customer, there are various internal departments, there is procurement, there is movement of logistics, and there are a whole lot of things. And when you talk of having robust processes, these processes need to cover all stakeholders so that everybody sees the relevant information for them. I'll move on to Hemant. Hemant, in the context of what Prasad spoke of, that that there are multiple stakeholders, both internal and external, when it comes to having an efficient and effective supply chain management. When you have multiple stakeholders and even external service providers involved, what do you think are the risks involved in managing such an efficiency in the supply chain, and what are the kind of things which you do internally which help you in managing such risk?
So clearly, automotive industry is having SCM as one of its lead strategy. Most businesses would have SCM as one of their strategies, but for automotive industry, SCM is the key strategy. And what I have seen in various industries is that most of the research and a lot of work has been done in optimizing the supply chain. And since the automotive industry has made its supply chain very lean and very, very optimized, the risks have become very high. I'm sure all of the people sitting here in this room, all of you who are in SCM, would agree with me when I say that almost 50 to 75% of our daily work actually is crisis management. And crisis management is the risk has materialized, What do you do to come up with a reaction plan? What do you do to come up with a contingency plan? How do you communicate that it has happened and this is what we are doing to the entire chain? About 6-7 years back, I remember when there was floods in Thailand and the automotive industry in India was very negatively impacted, and one of the large Japanese OEM had to shut its shop for almost 3 to 4 months. Now, we were quite actually happy doing the kind of work we were doing in our SCM, and that is more focused on crisis management. But when this whole Thailand episode happened and we had a lot of reflection internally, we said we will not continue to do the work the way we are doing. We will move away from crisis management to more like risk management in the supply chain. And by risk management, the differentiation, if I have to do with crisis management, is that instead of letting the risk materialize and then take action, we should be actually identifying the risk much before, assess the risks, and then do some management or mitigation of the risk. So this we started the process about 6 years back, and slowly we have got a full framework established. So just to give you some examples, as Amit has asked me, the risk can be various kinds, and we have bucketed the risk in 14 categories across our supply chain. So just to give you a few examples, the risk with our suppliers can be a risk on compliance. Suppose he doesn't pay PF, suppose he doesn't pay minimum wages, suppose he doesn't get his pollution control right. So these are compliance risks. These are threshold risks. If a supplier doesn't do this, you don't even do business with the supplier. Then you move to strategic risk. For example, one of the strategies which Mahindra follows is that we will, on a system, work with a single source. Now, this is a big strategic risk. Since you are single source with a supplier, if anything happens there, the risk profile is much higher. Clearly, this risk you have to identify, measure the risk, and then take mitigation action for this. The other risk can be geopolitical risk. I remember we are currently importing alloy wheels from China, and some of our models are single source from China. And 2 years back, we had this eyeball to eyeball confrontation between the Indian army and the Chinese army on the Arunachal border. And remember, our team suddenly took action. And even though the risk had not materialized, they had taken action, and our inventory for alloy wheels was taken up from 1 month to 4 months, because that's the lead time to develop an alloy wheel in India. Risk didn't materialize, but I think we were happy that our supply chain is agile to look at geopolitical risk. Another risk can be on management. Does the management of the supplier have succession planning? How do they retain their top talent? And there can be risks like that. Financial risk. Does the supplier make enough profit? How is the liquidity? How is his debt to equity ratio? So like that, giving you a few examples, like that we have 14 buckets of risk, and we have 92 checkpoints that when our auditors go to visit a supplier in the supply chain, they ask these 92 questions and then risk them. Of course, out of these 19 questions, each question is not similarly weighted. Certain questions are threshold questions. That means it's a go, no-go situation. And certain questions are double weighted and certain questions are single weighted. So once you have this whole risk identified and measured, obviously then you have to have strategies on what is the likelihood and what is the impact a typical 2x2 matrix you can create, and then take actions on how do you mitigate the risk. Recently, you must have seen one of the Maruti suppliers who was single source with a very important part in the vehicle had a fire, and the plant was shut down for almost 11-12 days. So these are strategic risks, and I'm sure Maruti management will take action, and the supplier management will surely take action to lower the impact of the risk and also to see how the likelihood of the risk can be done. I'm currently, as I speak to you, facing a situation since the last 2 days where one of our critical suppliers is having a labor slowdown. So these kind of issues keep coming up, but I think the beauty of the SCM system or the future-ready supply chain, as Amit has defined it, is are you able to identify the risk before it materializes, or you are doing just crisis management? The minute you identify it, you can always be better prepared, you can take action, and you can mitigate and manage the risk. One more thing which the risk framework provides is that everybody in the organization has same understanding of the risk. So we have a 5-point matrix: high, above average, average, below average, and low risk. Now when I say that the risk is above average, does everybody in the organization understand what is above average? Or when I say above average, somebody says, oh, the line is going to stop, it's going to be extremely high risk, and somebody just sleeps off saying, oh, the risk is above average, don't worry about it. So I think these are the points where everybody is on the same page on risk profile, everybody understands the risk lingo, what is the risk metrics, and then the whole organization across top to bottom is aligned on the strategy of risk management. I think that's what we have learned in last 5 years, we are implementing it in a lot of robustness. Just to tell you that currently in our team, 120 people are certified risk assessors. That means they are all trained, they have gone through a training, a test, and they have done an audit to prove that they are a certified risk assessors. And of our total supply chain, more than 150 suppliers we are covering on the risk audit. That means each of these 150 suppliers gets audited once every year. And then the top management is called, they are asked more questions, they have to give a mitigation plan, which is again tracked, and then they move from red to yellow to green, and this is how we try and capture. It's working very well, but I would still say that we are always learning in the process. We are always asking ourselves how we can make it still better. Because as I keep telling my team that the minute you talk about, Amit, future supply chain, the minute you take action, the future has actually become present, and future is still more distant from us, and we are always catching up. A lot of work to do, but I think it's a good framework for the automotive industry to follow.
So I think it's a dynamic world, and things keep on evolving, and the name of the game is to keep on chasing the future.
Absolutely.
When it comes to having the robustness in the supply chain. So now I'll move on to Vikas, because we have heard from Prasad and we have heard from Hemant in terms of how having a robust process, and how when they look at the risk in that process, they look at how they look at service providers, how they look at the other parties, because supply chain is about partnerships and collaborations. And you work with multiple customers. How do you ensure as an organization, as a business, that that if you're working with, let's say, hundreds of customers, how you align with, let's say, 100 different processes?
Yep.
And I think that will be key to success for, let's say, a service provider like yours.
Yeah, sure, Amit. Good morning, everybody. I think we heard, Prasad talked about the 7 C's and Hemant talked about risk management. He gave us the Thailand example in terms of the impact. I think we are globally connected, and as a service provider, DHL, I'll try to give you 4 key perspectives to that. As a service provider, how are we trying to mitigate a situation that Hemant faced when Thailand was under flood? So as we say, we are globally connected, and there's a program called 360 Degrees Resilience. Now, what does that do? It looks at longer term and shorter term. So longer term perspective can be for our customers that, hey, we would look at your hotspots. So hotspot can be a single source supplier. Hotspots can be a tsunami in Japan. A hotspot can be a flooding in Thailand. And what we can do as a service provider and work long term for a very good solution. So that would actually mean that we are proactively working with, what Hemant thought was around a proactive and a long-term solution to create a resilient supply chain. So that's from a long-term perspective. And what happens on a day-to-day basis? The Resilience 360 program actually does what? If you look at the update we did today, yesterday we had rains in London, and along with the Brexit, it rained as well, okay? And a lot of parts of London were flooded. So what would happen is, if there is a logistics provider or a service provider from India, auto manufacturer who is supplying parts in the UK, and it can get impacted, what would happen is a lot of people would get that message very proactively. Hey, there is rain in London. What does the team in India need to do? And what does the team in London need to do? We had air traffic control strike in France yesterday, for example, and we are globally connected. So the 360-degree resilience program of Deutsche Post DHL gives you a long-term fix and a short-term fix, Hemant. So that's what it is, looking at it from creating a resilient supply chain. So that's one part of it, creating a resilient supply chain using the 360 resilient program. And what we also believe is that as a global service provider, one of the key things that we need to see is how are we predicting global megatrends? If we look at Deutsche Post DHL, we believe there are 2 global megatrends which are going to reshape supply chain globally. There are many that we think of. I'll give you 2 perspectives around that, the 2 key ones. One is global urbanization, the rate of urbanization, and the second one would be 3D printing. Now, how are these 2 going to impact supply chain in a very, very big way? And in 20 years down the time, I think we'll be looking at supply chain in a very, very different way. Now, when you look at global urbanization, at the rate at which urbanization is happening, how can we really ensure the city of Bombay is choked and many, many more metros would be created globally? So it's a responsibility of responsible global providers like us to ensure that the number of vehicles going into the city are reduced. Now, the congestion would be astronomous if we don't take action around that. So what are we trying to do as part of rapid urbanization is a program to make our cities more green? And how can we ensure that less number of vehicles go into a city? I'll give you a small example. If we look at all fashion retailers in Mumbai or all hospitals in Mumbai would get services via small vehicles where all the warehouses are in Bhiwandi. At any point in time, hundreds of small vehicles are hitting the city of Mumbai. And what a wonderful solution could be, we call it lean time replenishment. Now, what is lean time replenishment? The lean time is typically a night time, and how good it would be if instead of hundreds of trucks going in, there are bigger vehicles that go, they go during lean time, and we take the pressure off the roads during the daytime. I think these are the programs which are very close to Deutsche Post DHL and urbanization, and how to make our cities more beautiful, green, take the traffic off the roads is a great program that we are working on. And those solutions are already being given to a lot of our customers as I speak to you right now. We are investing in bigger assets, for example. Why do we need to move on a 18 or a 20 feet and why not a 32 or a 40 for a long haul and make the country more go green, et cetera, and take the load out of the cities, for example. So that's rapid urbanization is one key thing. The second one is 3D printing. As you all know, I think 3D printing is a revolutionary idea. A lot of things are actually happening outside India on 3D printing. And I'll give you a perspective, and Amit asked me to give an example around that. We all use mobile phone, we all use laptops, for example. So what happens as a service provider? If your mobile phone or a laptop goes down, you go to a service provider, what he needs to have an engineer and have a part, right? And if he doesn't have a part, there's a problem, right? So there is a supply chain which needs to adapt and create and forecast and create those parts, and we ship those parts. If we talk about 3D printing, what could happen is 20 years down the road, you need not stock that part. There is a 3D printer, and there is somebody who has got the drawing of the chip that you want in your phone, and using a 3D printer, we are able to print the chip that you want on your phone on site. So what would actually mean is that you are taking away from storage of a chip to storage of raw material, which will be used in 3D printing. So the future supply chain is about your ability to have various kinds of materials which will be used in 3D printing, storage of 3D printers, and that's what you're trying to think about 20 years down the road, whether that's really required or not. So I think the second key part is around global mega trends, and that's where we want to help our customers in terms of looking at those global mega trends and working proactively towards them. I think that's second part of my thing. So one was 360-degree resilience, second one is around predicting global mega trends, and third one is around innovation. I think we talk about innovation, and innovation can be as small as doing a Gamba walk in your warehouse and looking at small things which need to be done. I call it innovation. And the big innovation is about us working on augmented reality. We have warehouses in Europe where we are using augmented reality to pick a part, which means that both my hands are free. We can do it with voice picking as well, but we are using augmented reality to really see how we can pick a product faster, more accurately, et cetera, et cetera. Innovation around using robots where the cost is pretty high from a manpower standpoint, and using robots to pick and make our supply chain more agile. So that's more around the innovation piece. And the last part, as we see our responsibility, is towards seeing how large regulation can be nicely implemented. Goods and services tax in India is a great example. And I think all of us have seen there's a GST model law 2016 which came some time ago. It's in the public domain and all of us should read it, and many of you must have read it. So what we're trying to see is goods and services tax is good, but what does it really bring onto the ground? Does it really bring on the ground that the checkposts go away? And I think what our understanding of the initial draft law that has come in is that it may happen, which is a wonderful thing to happen. If the checkposts are going away and they will be substituted by flying squads, so one part of the problem goes away. But what we are trying to work with the authorities and tell them is that, hey, you know what? How can we make it more slick? So I think we are giving our opinion on the GST model law, and our opinion is that we can probably if you look at the current law, what it says is that driver would carry a lot of invoices. Now, if a driver is stopped and he's asked about the invoice, he has no clue about it. Now, what we're trying to say is, I think within GST, there is something called transaction ID. If you implement that transaction ID, GSTN is really flowing in the country. So I think as an industry body, those kind of thoughts to be given within the goods and services tax and making it very well when it is actually implemented. So I think working with the industry bodies and the government to help them and to give our views is another big responsibility that we see. So Amit, I believe these are the 4 key trends, and as DHL, I think we believe that's our responsibility, and to help our customers and help to bring in our global perspective as to when a GST happened in Canada or anywhere else, what are the changes we saw there, and what are the good practices that can be brought here. is something that we are trying to add value on. And I think we're very proud of that in terms of helping our customers and the current government from that perspective, yeah?
Thanks, because it was fascinating to hear, and especially your example about the 3D printing. And, it's really like, I shudder to think if that becomes reality, then, all the warehousing, all the storage, the inventories, we'll be talking of a just-in-time inventory and just-in-time manufacturing. You're talking of 20 years, and the way things are moving, it may be shorter than that.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll move on to Prakash. Prakash, your views. You've heard the panelists talk on the processes, the new innovations, and from a service provider's perspective, what are your thoughts?
Yes, we are today talking about the integrated supply chain, agile and future ready. I would say we were talking about most of the time best practices. I would focus more on the next practice because that is what is needed now. Best practices is like, asking and copying it, but we have to create something completely different, something completely new. And let me focus today on where we are in India, because India is the fastest growing economy today. It is growing on the back of consumption. So our economy is consumption-driven economy. And I have a number to substantiate that. If you look at the port volumes today, the port volumes have grown only by 1%. But we all know that our export volumes have dropped by approximately 15%. So the other balancing figure, of course, is our imports. So the imports have gone up. Now, imports have gone up either because of raw materials or because of finished goods which we consume. It could be white goods, it could be telephone, whatever commodities coming in. Of course, China is the main supplier for that. So what is needed is a very robust system over here on logistics. And that is what will help India to grow even further. I must admit that the government, the steps they have taken, the direction which they have shown is clearly on improving logistics and bringing the cost down. We heard from Mr. Digikar that the cost in India is so high in terms of logistics and we need to bring it down. Now to bring that down, we will need a seamless transaction. We will need that infrastructure, and that infrastructure spend has to come from the government. So the government has to take that first step, which they're taking. For example, the dedicated rail freight corridor. Of course, this should have been ready, I think, long ago. I remember this. It was to be ready by 2009 because I was at JNPT those days in GTI, and I was told that terminal number 4 will not come until dedicated rail freight corridor is there or not. But today we are delayed. However, the steps are being taken. 40 some kilometers are ready, and approximately 980 kilometers would be ready between Rewari and Vadodara by, let's say, 2018. That's what we hear. Now, if those are the targets, that means the government is facilitating. But along with that, the processes have to also change. The process excellence has to come in. We have to take cost out of the system. If we are not going to do that, we are not ready for the future. We will continue to suffer, and the logistics will bring down the economy and the overall growth. So for the growth of India, because of all the steps which the government has taken, look at Sagarmala, look at Make in India. All these steps have been taken. Now, maybe it takes few years before we are there and we are seeing that fructified, but by then we have to be ready in the logistics. Now, if the Make in India, which in my opinion actually was started by the automotive industry long ago, it was some 4 years ago where Gujarat actually got into that Make in India mode. You take today Ford Motors, manufactures for the world. You take Maruti, which is coming in Mehsana, Suzuki, is going to manufacture for the world. Take Tata's in Sanand. I mean, all those steps have been taken for Make in India. I am of the opinion that, as Mr. Raghuram Rajan is, that is, it's not only Make in India, but Make for India. Because the consumption is going to demand that Make in India. And apart from that, that only can succeed if there is a clear and a clean logistics play. For all that to happen, of course, we touched upon GST. Today, unfortunately, if you see most of the manufacturers, their logistics are dependent on the taxation. That is, taxation is the main mode or deciding factor. If the GST comes in, I'm very confident that it will move on what is best for logistics. So for us, it is extremely important to go away from the silo thinking today that we have. Even if we are getting the infrastructure in, we must go away from the silo thinking. We should bring technology in. We have the best and the smartest brains in the world. Today we are the exporter of technology to the world. I mean, the smartest brains are sitting all over the world. They are Indians. We are not developing it for ourselves. I am of the opinion, strong opinion, that we must first look at the technology. How do we simplify? How do we cut the silos? A classic example today is, if you see that the cargo is being imported, the container comes into the port. Now it needs to be railed out. Unfortunately, you've got to feed the information again. The manifest of the ship is not being used sufficiently by the rail authority and by the customs. So we need to get that out, get one system. The port community system which is being promoted, it is the PCS. That is exactly what we need. This should have been there for some time. To get the future ready, we need all this development. Yeah, sir, I know, but it has to be implemented full force across India, because it's not enough that only the primary or the premier port of India does it. So for e-commerce to succeed, Make in India, Smart City, Sagarmala, let me address the Sagarmala part of it. Sagarmala, we talked about it, sir, was all about the ports and the connectivity by the water. But that is not enough. Where is the last mile and the first mile connectivity? We got to take the trucks off the road. We got to put more and more on the rail and the sea. But for that, we need the road so that we can get all this connectivity done. That's where the manufacturers will actually go and save. It is saving in the loss of cargo. It is also because otherwise, let's assume for a minute, 6,000 tons. You can move by a ship. However, what are we doing? We are getting some 300 trucks for it. So move away, because even 2 trucks delaying the whole process or meeting an accident, you have lost cargo. Let's move away, take cost out. That's my primary submission here, that we have to focus on that. Infrastructure development will definitely be the key, and of course multimodal. And multimodal will succeed only when we have all this infrastructure in place. So to be future ready and to be agile and to bring the cost down, apart from whatever we have discussed here, it is infrastructure and technology and the processes.
Thanks, Prakash. I think you made a very, very pertinent point when it came to especially the GST, that today the decisions on location of businesses is not really driven by optimization from a logistics cost perspective.
Correct.
It is more tax optimization rather than logistics. Not only logistics cost, but also the turnaround time, optimization of the entire logistics chain. I think that's a very, very interesting thoughts. Before I open the floor to the panel to the questions from the floor, I'll put the panelists on the dock and I will ask one common question to all the panelists in terms of, sir, you're from the government, what are your expectations from the industry?
Well, the industry should not feel that government is not on their side. We are always willing, to look into their grievances, their problems which they are facing in doing business. And as I've already said, the government is very proactive to solve all the problems that they're having and make sure that, especially the state government I'm talking about,
sure.
That the state is the, favored, most favored state in terms of, business, for doing business. And the state government is making all-out efforts
Sure.
to promote the ease of doing business in the state.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir Degekar, what is your expectation from, let's say, the manufacturers and the logistics service providers?
It's on, sir.
Hello. Is it on? Yeah.
It's on.
I forgot to mention, in JNPT port area, we are coming up with SEZ, Special Economic Zone, which is about spread on 467 acres of land. And I will request the industrialists to invest in the SEZ area. Also, we are opening about more than 100 acres of land for biofuel, biodiesel, and edible oil. So any import and export sort of business and which optimizes the proximity to the port can be attracted, and we welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to Prasad. Prasad, your expectations from, let's say, the service providers.
Right. So basically, the industry is looking for, I think, GST implementation. It's a long wait now, and we should put all the attempts to implement GST. This because it's just not only simplify the business model. As we all know today, our logistics infrastructure is based on cost optimization. And second, probably the biggest advantage is that, as we were saying, that the checkposts and the vehicles where they are held up for all documentations will be able to clear it fast.
Sure.
So that our reach to customer, our response to customer will be very fast. That is what we are waiting for. And although we are all aware of the initiatives what governments are taking and what authorities are taking, we would like to get those accelerated to help business to take the next leap in this direction.
Sure, thanks. Hemant, over to you for your expectations.
So first of all, I must concede the point that the government is clearly very, very proactive currently. And this, I can surely vouch for the government of Maharashtra because we have many, many plants in Maharashtra. And we can clearly see that the government's whole approach to business and the whole approach to industrialization in the state is much more proactive than it was earlier. That's not to say that I am a co-panelist with the senior members from the ministry. This is a real fact. GST, my co-panelists have already spoken. I think another thing which the government can help the industry is to assure the industry by action and by words that the rules of the game will not change in midway. There are many cases I can cite here where the rules of the game have been changed without any explanation, without any clear logic of data behind it. I think that gives a very, very insecure feeling to anybody in the industry, not only auto industry, I'm saying for any part of the industry. And if the rules are maintained and there is less tendency to change the rules and break the rules, I think that would be a real game changer for the industrialization in India, creating millions of jobs for the youth that are coming into the job market. That would be a very big deal. So come up with policies, come up with predictable policies, and please don't change it before the time comes, and give it sufficient notice to the industry to change if any policy is to be changed.
Thanks, Hemant. Because your expectations.
Yeah, Amit, I think my colleague George spoke in the morning as well, and I think Deutsche Post DHL firmly believes that India is a great market, and we are investing millions of euros in the market because Deutsche Post DHL is committed towards investments in India, and I think that's what is our firm belief. So, couple of things. I think goods and services tax is something we believe is overdue, and I think we are pretty close to our belief is implementing that, but getting it right is something that we are very, very keen on. Getting it right in a way that it enables creation of large warehouses, getting it right in terms of enabling that a truck is moving from Delhi to Chennai without any post, and that there's a process in place which is so IT enabled. And when you read the new model law, it is working towards that, and I think that's a very, very encouraging story. I think that's number one. And number two for us, I think when we look at growth in India, the only thing that we are worried about is people. I think when you look at, India would need GST going, large warehouses coming in. India would need 100,000 smart warehouse managers to run those sites. If you have to run, just to give you a perspective, an average warehouse size in India is about 20,000 square feet. And when you look at post-GST and the warehouses, we are building 500,000 square feet. Many warehouses of DHL in India right now we have built are upwards of 500,000 square feet. And when you run that warehouse 24/7, access control, paperless environment, RF, truck parking, driver's restroom, unidirectional traffic, you need smart people. So we are would be happy if there are supply chain programs which are created both at white collar and blue collar. I think blue collar is a bigger concern, and I think we would be very happy to support the industry, the government in terms of bringing in trainers and helping with
skill
that.
development.
I think skill development is the thing for an agile SCM is Deutsche Post view. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Vikas. Prakash, your comments before we move it. To the
Sure.
question.
For all cargo logistics, which is an integrated logistics service provider, which is amongst the top in India today. For us, two key things are, of course, the infrastructure development. That is key for anything to become seamless, anything to become, agile and future ready. And the second one is technology. It is to bring in systems which talk to each other in the various departments of the governance. So that is the two very, very important areas we would want it to come in. And of course, from all this is obvious answer is take cost out.
Sure. Thanks, Prakash. We'll now open the questions from the floor. We'll invite the questions. I've already got two questions. The first question is to Dr. Vijay Satbir Singh. The question is from Professor Amal Roy. His question is that the government projects are typically characterized by time overruns, cost overruns, issues around land acquisition, then red tapeism, availability of funds, and in the past we have seen issues around corruption as well. In that context, he's saying, how do we see, what is the plan in terms of how we will manage the projects, let's say for coastal roads and the Metro 3s, more efficiently and more effectively? The mistakes of the past don't get repeated.
Well, I agree with you that there have been many instances of delays and the cost, escalating to 2 times, 3 times in some of the projects. I've seen some of the railway projects, in fact, in which the cost escalated to 3 to 4 times. There have been many instances like this. Corruption is another issue, and red tapeism, of course, delays procedures. So the government is, as I've already mentioned, is taking care of all these problems that are there, and number of procedural formalities are being done away with. A number of archaic rules and laws are being repealed, and the procedures are being simplified. Documentation is being made more professional. Simple forms are replacing detailed and complicated formats. IT is helping us in a big way. It's bringing about total transparency in the system. E-tendering is taking place for any procurement above certain limit. I think now it's 3 lakhs of rupees.
3 lakhs.
E-tendering takes place for most of the procurements in the government. And that has reduced, the extent of corruption and also, other issues which were there. We also have a Right to Information Act. So you can see any file, you can note down the notings. PILs, courts are there, and they are also, keeping everybody on the toes. In fact, sometimes we get so much bothered by the courts that it becomes quite difficult.
Sure. No, I think it's an interesting take, and I'll just add my one bit to it. We keep on talking of delays in project work world over. All large projects tend to have some delays. We like to talk about that projects only in India tend to get delayed, but my experience, I have worked very closely in the infrastructure space, and world over all large complex infrastructure projects, they tend to have some delays. The issues around large infrastructure projects tend to be very, very complex, and there are multiple stakeholders. You will have the local governments, the social circles, and if you're talking of a 500-kilometer road, it will go through like 2 or 3 states, and with different people, different kinds of cultures along that road, and we don't have the processes built in to take care of those issues. And it's not only in India, it's there everywhere.
Environment issues, forests.
Yeah, so you're very right. Environment, forest issues, they add to the complexity of the matter. So having said that, the kind of things which you are hearing from the government, both at the state level and the central level, it's very, very positive in terms of pushing investments in the infrastructure space. We are seeing a lot of action. It is, I can tell you because I work in the infrastructure space that lot of work is happening very, very silently. When it comes to streamlining certain aspects, as Dr. Singh also touched upon in terms of streamlining the processes, streamlining the, some of the requirements around forms. Some have been done away with, some have been really simplified. So we'll move on to the next question. The next question is for Prasad. Prasad, the question is again from Professor Amal Roy. How are you planning to provide medical devices stroke implants to Indian through various means like domestic manufacturing, SCM, cost optimization?
So, the
Indian
first,
customers.
Yeah, okay. So the first and most important part for the medical devices company is to understand what really a customer wants. Because the challenge over here is, demand forecasting. Because we can particularly forecast what are the procedures going to happen, but in a procedure probably you require about 200 to 300 various particular products in the procedure. So how are you forecasting for that? So our efforts are to first of all reach to the customer, understand their demand, capture those demand in our planning system, and adjust our internal supply chain processes to fulfill the demand. That will actually give us the leverage on responding to the customer demand and working on fulfilling the customer service. I think that is the most important part of it. And then we are also internally working on how do we reduce our lead time, how do we reduce our response to market with various functions involved. And one of the factor is also the imports what we are doing. And with all the initiatives what we just heard, is going to help us definitely to reduce our lead time and to make the product available to the patients. So that is where two priorities, clearly one is addressing the demand, first of all understanding the demand and aligning our internal process to fulfill the demand. And second is reducing the lead times, what currently we are, and that's the challenge across the medical devices. If you see the typical lead time from order to border is roughly about 65 days.
Sure.
How do you reduce those lead time is something is a challenge which we are working on.
Sure.
Will you pass on the benefits to the patients in India?
Oh yes, sure. Yes. So that is, as I said, customer and patient is our first responsibility, and we'll look forward to pass on the benefits to whatever we can do for that. Yeah.
Any more questions, please? Yes. Can you please identify yourself and direct the question to a specific individual?
Hello. Hello. Yeah, my name is R. Padmasanan. I am from Supreme Industries Limited. I am the DGM Imports. Thanks for your discussions, and I heard everything. But the manufacturer or the importer, what they want, not discussed, and we have not received any concrete, what is called, concrete effectiveness to the manufacturer, I can say. The first thing is, DPD, the chairman has explained, they have issued one notification saying that GTA and NSICT can charge 2 or 3 shifting charges. Notification is okay, but what charges they have to charge, they have not notified. Second thing is, I want to express my view here on to the government, is that the charges of logistic company as well as this shipping company, nobody is controlling. They are putting their prices as they wish. If the government can look into it and have any control on that, can you explain to the government? Because one is JNBT's notification. Second is steamer companies' expenses. 34 items they are charging in a bill to an importer. The cost has gone up like anything. 1 minute, sir. Like anything. So our costing also automatically go up. We cannot reduce or pass on any benefit to the consumer, actual user. In the discussions, you have not discussed anything for the benefit to the consumer or the actual user, actual consumers or the middle class people. Can you explain that also? Two things. One is in the notification.
Can you just be a little
Yeah.
specific on the question which you want to ask?
Question is, in the steamer company today, steamer company as well as the logistic companies charging exorbitant to the importers.
Okay, thank you for the question.
One. Second is, JNPT, this is to the chairman. JNPT issued a notification on 15th of May.
DPD.
Yeah, BPD.
That I will explain.
1 minute. That two shifting or
I will
three
explain
shifting.
We understood the question.
That also you
Let's-
understand.
can-
These two
we need to
questions.
allow the others to also ask
Okay.
questions. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Regarding DPD, we are having discussion with these two terminals. What they are saying that first shifting the container from the ship, keeping it in a stack, again shifting it to the DPD stack, again shifting to the TT. So they are saying they will be charging double. So we are in discussion stage. I think we'll resolve that issue. But certainly it is going to be cheaper if DPD is not there. If it goes to CFS, it will be costing you more than 40,000 to 70,000 per TEU. These shifting charges will not be more than 5 to 7,000. But we are in discussion stage. Thank you for raising the issue. Yeah. We are discussing with them. Otherwise, if it goes to CFS, it costs more than 60,000. They are saying they will be charging 14,000. We are in discussion stage. We'll sort out that issue. Thank you for raising the issue. We are discussing with them.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Myself, Rahul Nargunde from IndoShortLife Pune. And I have two questions. One maybe Digika sir can answer the first one. Like overseas, what we see is there is a detachable trailer to the main vehicle. So when we say ease of doing business and all those things, are we going to have any such policy wherein the trailer can be detachable so that not every time the trailer has to move with the own vehicle? And second question, maybe Dr. Singh can answer. We are talking about e-tendering. Does government have any policy about reverse auctions, which we have in the industry?
What's the other one?
We are considering e-auction. Do you have a policy around the reverse auction?
Reverse auction.
Are you considering that? E-tendering?
Tendering.
Sir, it is on. Don't worry. You आपका speaker है. Yeah. They can hear you.
Hello.
Yeah.
I have not understood your question. You kindly just write it on a paper along with your email ID. I will answer it
Okay, fine.
and give it to you. Thank you.
So about the second question.
E-tendering, as I've told you, this policy is in place. The other one, reverse auctions, which you have mentioned, so far we've not considered it, but maybe, in case there are suggestions, we will certainly, we are willing to, we are open to this
Yeah.
suggestion.
Because for example, this is a new trend in the industry, and like company like BHEL also have the options of reverse auctioning, wherein you get the lowest price, which they try to insure and assure.
We are open to the suggestion and will definitely consider.
Good morning. My name is Subhat Kumar Jindal. I belong to UPL Limited, heading their unit in Gujarat, Jagadia. We discussed about the future-ready organizations. Certainly, the organizations will come up, with the R&D activities and developing new products and new chemicals. With that, we will be requiring maybe some import of hazardous chemicals, like first time ever in India to be done. So my question is that how the government agencies, how the administration and port authorities can support industry for their safe handling and then faster deliveries to industry.
Sorry?
I think it's hazardous import goods. I think it is dealt by Pollution Control Board.
No, the point here is, when the material is to come to the port, say, for the first time, so that generally there is a discussion that how the port is equipped to handle that chemical.
Do you know what kind of hazardous chemical you are importing? I will answer to your question.
Sure.
No,
And
but can I come in?
Please.
I think the ports definitely have a special area to stack such containers, so I don't think that's a challenge.
He's asking for something new.
No, the point comes is, if some chemical is to be imported for the first time, then there are difficulties.
Doesn't matter, because if the ships can bring it, the ports can store it. Yeah. Because that's controlled by the shipping company, right? They have the classes. So if the ships can bring it, the ports can store it. And apart from that, there are warehouses. Like, for example, All Cargo, recently we have this new company called Avashya CCI. We have special warehouses for storing such chemicals or goods which are hazardous.
And same way, the transportation of those chemicals on the road, in your opinion, means if those chemicals are already being, or similar chemicals even, if are being imported, then there is no issue with regard to import of such?
I don't see that as a challenge as far as it is being approved by the authorities which are there in India. So once you have the approval from the shipping company, the ports can do it. If they can do it, obviously, we need to get the approval from the road authorities to carry it in a special way.
So means during the transit, let's say on-road transit within the country, will it in any way be the responsibility of industry to handle if there is any unforeseen situation because of that?
Well, that's a good point. Whether the industry should do it, I think it will be a joint effort. I'm definite about it. That will be a joint effort with, that is the logistics company or trucking company, along with the product owner.
The issue which can come up with, or which is likely to be there, means that the effort would be, or the point could be, okay, if this incident happens at, say, 300 kilometers away from the industry location, means there the support of that administration will be must.
So see, I think the issue is more around, we heard Hemant talking about the, looking at risk and planning for it. It is about, when you are looking at that you are transporting, you are likely to transport a hazardous chemical, which you are possibly doing for the first time. One should visualize where all one is likely to see the hurdles, and reach out to those authorities, inform them, and take their approval. That's the extra mile possibly you will need to go to manage it. To expect, let's say a government authority to see it for the first time and clear it immediately, I think is a little too much. The official sitting there may not really understand that chemical.
There is a list which explains that these chemicals can be imported to particular port.
Yes.
And the shipping company also knows this.
Exactly.
Can I supplement the answer?
Sure.
Yeah.
So that people don't go away with our knowledge.
Yeah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. There are two questions which are left unanswered. One was the question on the chassis, whether the chassis can, whether the truck or the cabin can be moved away and the chassis can be left. Now that's the US system of having a prime mover and a chassis system. Now there in US, the chassis are kept with the trailers, with the containers, but that's only one of the systems, and the prime mover moves away. But there's a cost to that. There's a cost to the chassis, there's the insurance cost to the chassis, and also there's a higher cost to the chassis. So everything gets added up to that. And there's a system of on-hiring and off-hiring those chassis, and there's a cost to the prime mover coming back to take the chassis all over again. So that system can be done, and part of it is being done in India. The second question was on the dangerous goods. The dangerous goods move by sea under the International Maritime Dangerous Goods Code, that is the IMDG code. It does not prohibit any cargo to be moved by sea, except that there are a lot of precautions to be taken. The only cargoes which have major precautions is class 1 and class 7. Class 1 is explosives and class 7 is radioactive goods. These are the two commodities which are coming under major constraints, but then there are specific approvals which can be taken to move those cargoes. I have personally moved explosives from Sweden. I have also moved radioactive goods from Sweden and other places. As far as the railways is concerned, there's what is called the Red Book, which has its own code of dangerous goods. As far as the roads is concerned, there's a Road Act, which classifies the dangerous goods to be moved. As far as the ports are concerned, they have their own list, which goods can be discharged, which goods cannot be discharged. And all ports, and I must say all ports, including all major ports, do not allow you to discharge class 1 and class 7. Class 1 can be done in Bombay with specific approvals only at Anchorage. Class 1 can also be discharged at JNPT if defense cargo it is, and so on and so on. But in short, if you have the right approvals, right precautions, right carriage requirements are met, you can bring in anything you want. Yeah?
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah. Myself, VK Agarwal from Manida. My question is addressed to the chairman of JNPT. Sir, at JNPT there are 3 terminals, and the biggest terminal is GTI. And the vessels which are coming from, say, Far East or Southeast Asia, 90% of the vessels are going to GTI. Only 10% of the vessels are going to the other 2 terminals. And you know, in case of GTI, which is in operation from last 15 years, lot of problems are there. Even in the month of April, there was no movement of containers for 10 days, 15 days. As a result, when we are talking of supply chain, so it is a very vital and essential part of the supply chain. First thing is maximum travel, labor travel is at GTI. It should be come under essential activities. There should not be any labor unrest. There was a village fair for 3 days, no working in GTI. Only attendance was hardly 10%. Movement of the containers was delayed by 4 or 5 days. So the vessels which are coming from Southeast Asia, 90% are going over there. There should be equal distribution on all the terminals, 50% to GTI, 20% to NSICT, 25% to JNPCT. This is first thing. And there should not be any delay, strike, nothing, whatsoever it may be. When we are talking of direct port delivery, we are talking of movement of the container fast, GTI cannot behave in this fashion. This is first point. Second point is, at the same terminal, say GTI, 10 different carriers are coming. One is charging TSC 9,000, another is charging 11,000, third is charging 10,000. This variation should not be there. It should be curbed immediately.
Okay. Regarding labor unrest, GTI is facing a lot of labor unrest for last 1 year. And now they have removed the contractor, they have appointed the new contractor, and also there is an issue about some workers, and you know that about 3,000 hectares of the land has been acquired from 12 villages, and there is always demand from the local people that only the project affected persons should be recruited and no outsiders should be allowed, which is humanly, I think, correct. And now they have recruited the local people, they are being trained. But regarding ISMA and DPD charges, I think I will look into also, you said about 9,000 and 10,000.
9,000 to 11,000 varying from carrier to carrier.
Yeah.
It should be the same at one particular terminal.
Okay.
It may vary from terminal to terminal.
Yeah,
but
this being a private terminal, I'll certainly look into, but I am chairman for JNPT, I'll look into this.
Okay, sir.
Thank
you.
Yeah. Thank you. One last question.
I'm Ankush Razurkar from GE Pune. I have a question for, I repeat this question many a times on various forums. Today I have an opportunity where, you know, Mr. Singh from government side is there. So the question is for both Mr. Vikas Anand from DHL and also Mr. Singh, that we are talking about future ready supply chain, and one of the element of this supply chain is road transportation. And this road transportation for future ready supply chain in India, unfortunately at the moment, is primarily managed by inorganized or unorganized sector. So if we really want to get ready for future, I'm sure this is one element where we look forward to some initiatives coming in from both service providers, industry side, and also I do not know what government can do such that this inorganized sector in long run moves towards organized sector and becomes something similar to, air freight, ocean freight, where the sectors are pretty organized and there is a structure in the system, and we are not at the prey of, a local decentralized service providers.
Do you want to take that first? Think about it. Yep. So before Dr. Singh talks about the government perspective, from a service provider or a contract logistics standpoint, you would see, Ankush, that when we talk about GE and interactions, and generally by DHL in India, we are investing in differentiated assets. And what does that really mean? One of the pain points that we have in India is a lot of movement of goods happen non-palletized. So the truck is getting loaded by cases. And I think a long-term view is that if we are able to move it on pallets, which is the standard view across many geographies that we do, when we move product on a pallet on a truck, you can reduce the cost of loading and unloading, and the product is more secure. So what we have done as a part of investments in India is setting up multi-axle vehicles which have carrying capacity of up to 29, 30 tons, 40 feet, which have got curtain raisers. So the ability of that vehicle is that you can load it from the side and not just from the back, which actually helps. Now, and that would actually mean that we can move palletized cargo across the length and breadth of India. There are a few challenges to that. All the DHL warehouses in India are able to unload palletized cargo because you've got forklifts at the side. But the typical challenge is if you are moving palletized cargo from our warehouse to a facility where that option of unloading is not available, then you tend to struggle. But from an industry standpoint, I can tell you that you will see a movement towards multi-axle vehicles. You would see a movement towards curtain-sided vehicles, which can be loaded from the sides, and an effort to move cargo on pallets. I think that could create a lot of efficiencies for a lot of consumer companies and in your industry, Ankush. That's my perspective from a contract logistics transport standpoint, and probably you can have a government view on that.
Now, your question is regarding the road transport sector being in the unorganized sector. Now, I think it's a question of the business processes which are there, which are evolving over a period of time. And as the business expands, develops further, then we'll see the organized sector also stepping in. But from the government perspective, I don't think the government can actively intervene and, decide some organizations for this purpose. Of course, I mean, we are heavily dependent upon road transport, for our business. And I think around 60% of the transport sector is through roads. Whereas there is a huge potential in water transports.
Yep.
In fact, only 3% of the transport is through water ways, and there also government can definitely do something, and the government is exploring different ways to promote the waterways, and like China, they have done very well in this area, and I think around 40%, more than 40% of their transport is through waterways and water transportation.
See, I think I'll just add my 2 bits to it, Dr. Singh. Changing of business models from organized to from unorganized to organized is a function of what is the requirement of the people using it. We heard from 2 of the manufacturers that their needs are becoming more complex. They are looking at much more value add from the service providers. I think that will put pressure. The individual unorganized sector will find it difficult to meet those needs, and it will lead to automatic movement towards organized and formal sector. It's a complete, market forces at play. And I agree with Dr. Singh that there is very limited which government can do to intervene and, force a direction towards a particular direction. I don't think that's a role of the government.
Ola is a very good example, or Uber is a very good example.
Yeah. So, whenever there is a need, it will come in. It's taking a bit of time for getting into an organized sector. That's the dynamics of business. But I think we are closer to a time when we will see more organized players moving into road transportation. But we'll have to wait and watch. So thank you so much for all your questions, and thank you so much to all the panelists for their views and their comments. And I had a pleasure asking questions and just listening to all the points. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. We have a memento for all of you, so request you to kindly stay back on the stage. Mr. Rishi Kapoor, request you to kindly come forward and present the mementos to our moderator first and then to our speakers. Well, that was indeed an engaging and enlightening session in their panel discussion, and thank you for those questions. I'm sure there are many more questions from your side. As we will be slipping to short break now, you can definitely connect with the speakers and take your questions forward. To our moderator, Mr. Amit Bansal, and to all our speakers, Mr. Anil Digikar, Mr. Vijay Sadbir Singh, Mr. Hemant Sikka, Mr. Prakash Shidhar, Mr. Prakash Tutsiani. We have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. That was our first panel discussion today, an engaging one, and we promise you that the next few panel discussions will also be equally engaging.